SmackDown for the PS1 was released in 2000, first in North America on March 2nd and then in Europe on April 14th. It was developed by Yuke's and published by THQ. Previous wrestling games on the PlayStation had been slow-paced and marred by complex button mapping. I am obviously referring to the Acclaim series of WWF games. They developed them like they were Mortal Kombat games, and they have not aged well, simply put.
Boom chakalaka!
Yuke's, the developer of SmackDown, had been making wrestling games since 1995, previously creating the Touken Rasendan series of wrestling games in Japan for NJPW. Despite having a higher profile in Japan, the game engine used in SmackDown was not based on the Touken Rasendan titles, but rather The Pro Wrestling, a budget title developed by Yuke's as part of D3 Publishers' Simple series, and was released several months in Japan beforehand. The Pro Wrestling is a much more fast-paced affair than Touken Rasendan, and that is why I think it was chosen for the American market. 36 of WWF's highest profile wrestlers are available to play in a variety of match types. Most importantly for myself, the hardcore and anywhere full matches. I am not alone, as not only do the 5 backstage areas feature prominently in the game's trailer, but also on the back cover of the game's dual case. WCW Mayhem might have beaten it by a few months, but SmackDown was truly the first wrestling game to give you the proper backstage brawling experience that was a mainstay on weekly wrestling television at the time. Talking about the gameplay, what I can say is that SmackDown is a spammer's delight. Being based off a game from the infamous Simple series explains why there is no real strategy behind SmackDown or its sequel in terms of gameplay other than hit enough moves or taunts until you can pull off a finisher. It's simple. It's also unfulfilling, if still fun gameplay, as the hit and run combat is both its greatest flaw as well as its greatest strength. Pick up and play wrestling at its finest, but for hardcore fans, performing moves can feel weightless, the pace too quick and outcomes random. But if that doesn't describe the general in-ring quality of WWF's product in 1999, then I don't know what does. The focus is on pace. Like I said before, previous wrestling games on the PlayStation required stupidly complex button inputs to even do the most rudimentary of moves. Acclaim approaches wrestling games as if they had to play like beat-em-ups, which is an approach I must say has to come from either complete ignorance or belligerence of how wrestling actually works. It's understandable, since kayfabe was still pretty much respected in the wrestling business even by the late 90s, but the result still ended up in frustrating experiences that have aged pretty poorly. I know these games have their fans, but I am not one of them. SmackDown had simple pick up and play mechanics from day one. Anyone can play SmackDown, and that is the reason why it became a starting point for a now 20-year video game series. This is made only all the more better thanks to SmackDown's excellent near instant loading times. Even the Royal Rumble keeps its flow. With the fast pace maintained so consistently throughout this game, it's easy to see why some critics at the time of its release compared it to Tekken. Except for Hell in a Cell, Tornado Tag and the Brawl for All, every major match type featured in WWF at the time is included here, but due to the fast-paced nature of the gameplay, certain matches get lost in translation. Weapons in hardcore matches feel like cardboard, and escaping in a cage match feels like it's more down to chance than anything else, as your opponent never stays down long enough, no matter what you do. Create a Wrestler is decent. There's a lot of skin options, the ability to fine-tune the AI, as well as the ability to edit every single move in a wrestler's set. It is what it is, a good start that would get better and better, not much else can be said. Season mode is really basic, with only a handful of cutscenes available. The variety of stories is even more sparse, and most just feature ambushes and random challenges. Again, like with Create a Wrestler, it's a great start, but it would be a while before this feature was perfected. And finally, let's get to the presentation. The music was created by Matsufumi Ogata, with Kai Morioka and Rai Shimizu providing instruments. Ogata, whose greatest claim to fame was co-writing the music for Sonic CD, produces a sample scrum to go with the butt rock that you would expect from a Sonic composer. It's fantastic, really. I mean, at times it does sound like samples were just arbitrarily layered upon the kind of rock music you would expect from Sega in the early 90s, but nonetheless it serves as a perfect time capsule of where Japanese video game music was at the time. The user interface is weird. Firstly, it looks horribly compressed, either that or a bad noise filter. Secondly, the art style is somewhere in between the industrial grunge of the Acclaim titles and the more shiny Y2K aesthetic that would define the look of the SmackDown games until SmackDown vs. Raw. At least it's all blue, keeping in theme with it being a SmackDown game, but it wouldn't be until the next game until the SmackDown series came into its own.
Ready, camera 5, camera 7, tilt up. Ready, gold green, stand by, hit green, stand by lights, camera 6, pan right, and action. Welcome to SmackDown! Oh my god, this is great! If you
SmackDown 2 Know Your Role was released mere months after the first SmackDown game on November 20th in North America and the 1st of December in Europe, and this quick turnaround is evident with the final product for reasons I will get into soon. The roster for SmackDown 2 has expanded since the previous game to now 66 playable WWF superstars in over 20 match types, new entries including Casket, Hell in a Cell and TLC. Anywhere full matches have also been improved, with a very impressive full team accessible backstage areas to fight in. Perhaps that is where all the memory went. Again, I'll explain soon. Everything I said about how the first game plays also applies to SmackDown 2. The game feel is nearly identical to the predecessor, except for more fluid animations. About as much as could be expected for a development cycle that's less than 9 months. Maybe that could explain a lack of optimization in this sequel, as I don't know what's eating up the memory, but the loading times in SmackDown 2 are a huge disappointment, considering that the previous game had them near non-existent. The Royal Rumble, as you can see, has been turned into an absolute joke because of this. If Ukes has somehow kept around the source code for SmackDown 2 for the last 20 years, then removing these loading times completely should be a top priority if it ever got remastered. Create a Wrestler is improved from the last game with more intricate editing for appearance, an expanded available moveset, as well as the added features of entrance and sign editing. I was never big on creating original wrestlers, so all else I can say is that the loading times suck and did not help to inspire me. The season mode has also been improved with more cutscenes this time round that have more connective tissue than the previous game. You can even unlock characters this time round. But again, the loading times between matches are absolutely awful. One card featuring 8 matches could take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to get through, whereas in the first SmackDown game, you could skip an entire card in mere seconds. Simply put, Season Mode in SmackDown 2 is terrible and by far is the worst iteration from any wrestling game made by Ukes. The music was composed by a team of about 9 people, so even though Ogata does appear again in the credits, and some of the music he composed for Death Crimson OX sounds familiar, I can't really say who was the lead creative influence here. Ogata had the most experience as a composer at this point, but comparing the two games in terms of music is like night and day. There is much more of a techno influence within the game menus, however when it comes to the matches itself, it's once again pure fucking butt rock. and I have my suspicions as to where that came from. It's an odd soundtrack that manages to incorporate, like its predecessor, all the sensibilities from the 90s when it came to video game music, western or otherwise. I love it mainly because I played the game non-stop in the early 2000s, but there definitely are worse soundtracks I could wax nostalgic for. Without a doubt, one of the most curious aspects of SmackDown 2 Know Your Role is the design of its user interface. I don't really know how to describe this mixture of Y2K and hacker aesthetic, other than it comes off as some kind of cursed mod of the PlayStation 1 boot menu, with its floating spheres, glowing blue orb in the background, and the most bizarre sounds I've ever heard come out of a video game menu, wrestling or otherwise. The credit for this bizarre art style goes to Norifumi Hara, who is also credited as the producer of Know Your Role, as well as several other games in the SmackDown series. It's amazing that we actually know it was him, because not many games credit the person who designed the menu. Whatever developer does that is usually just credited as being part of the creative team. I guess when you are the boss, those kinds of accolades do not go unrecognized. Anyway, the menu design of Know Your Role is singular within the subgenre of wrestling games, as there is really no other wrestling game with a menu quite like it. That's why I love it. In conclusion, SmackDown 1 and 2 are really the only wrestling games you need to play on the PS1. It's not even funny how they blow the competition out of the water. As a matter of fact, it's a little sad. But loading times and lack of selling aside, SmackDown 1 and 2 are primo wrestling games from a time when wrestling had not or might never again be more popular. For those who already played it back when, I'd say they both hold up and you should give them a go. For those curious about where the 2K series began, I would also give it a recommendation, with the disclaimer that these games are fast-paced arcade experiences and in no way simulations. If that's what you are looking for, arcade wrestling games, then there are few better examples than the humble origins of the longest running wrestling video game series to date. Thanks for watching, please like, comment and subscribe, and goodbye.